Good evening. You're watching World News Tonight on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Brussels is gearing up for a Russian oil crackdown in Hungary and Slovakia as Donald Trump pushes Europe to cut off all energy ties with Moscow. As we go to air tonight, these are our top stories. Moscow is forced to raise taxes as Russia's economy stalls. Denmark ponders NATO action in the wake of further drone incursions. And a pro-Kremlin Moldovan oligarch is extradited in theft of the century scandal. Hungary and Slovakia could soon find themselves facing steep tariffs on their Russian oil supply. The European Union saying more details will be revealed as soon as possible. The move follows US President Donald Trump's call for Europe to do more in squeezing Moscow's war machine and will likely target the two countries that are currently exempt from the EU's purchasing ban on Russian energy. Kazimierz Szwyszak reports.
Purchasing Russian oil in the European Union could soon come at an additional cost. The bloc is working on tariffs on these imports, but not much detail has been revealed yet.
The only context in which those proposals are coming forward are precisely, as I said, to apply further pressure to the Russian war economy.
The idea for these new tariffs comes after US President Donald Trump recently criticized the EU for still purchasing Russian energy.
We have an ocean in between. You're right there. And Europe has to step it up. They can't be doing what they're doing. They're buying oil and gas from Russia while they're fighting Russia. It's embarrassing to them.
And the EU was quick to respond.
President Trump is absolutely right. We're on it. We have reduced already massively the gas supply from Russia, completely gotten out of Russian coal, and massively also reduced the oil supply, but there's still some coming to the European continent.
The bulk of Russian oil coming into the EU is imported by the two member states which are exempt from the total ban on Russian energy, Slovakia and Hungary. According to the European Commission, these two countries combined imported close to 9 million tons of Russian crude oil in 2024. That's a 2% increase compared to 2021. President Trump called Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban on Thursday to discuss the issue.
I have a feeling if I did, he might stop, and I think I'll be doing that.
Yet the Hungarian officials said after the call that the Prime Minister only
made the American president aware of the Hungarian angles which make for a rational decision in the country's interest.
The EU planned to completely phase out Russian energy by the end of 2027, but
We want to be out earlier, absolutely. So till the end of the year, we have the phasing out. We have now the sanctions on the table proposed. Member states have to agree. But we have to be faster because every payment is filling Putin's war chest.
And while the 19th sanctions package requires the agreement of all member states, including Hungary and Slovakia, the tariffs are a trade agreement, meaning they don't require total unanimity. That's a quick way for the EU to appease Trump and try and keep him involved in the peace process. According to analysts, Europe has no choice but to play for time with the US president.
Europe has to buy time. We are not strong enough, which is amazing, collectively to be able to confront Russia, certainly over Ukraine right now.
Slovakia, on the other hand, says other EU members are now buying more Russian gas than before.
Liquid gas from the Russia raised last year 1/3 more in the western part of Europe. So France, Spain, and Netherlands, and so on.
And while that's true, the EU has drastically decreased its reliance on Russian energy since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The bloc now hopes Washington will follow with strong secondary sanctions on China and India, the two biggest buyers of Russian gas and oil. For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Szwyszak.
And as the war in Ukraine continues, the Kremlin is raising taxes to shore up Russia's public finances. with the country's oil revenues also tanking. Maciej Wilowski has more.
With its finances increasingly strained by the war in Ukraine, Russia is hiking taxes to raise more revenue. Starting in 2026, Russia's value-added tax, or VAT, will be set at 22%, up from the present 20%. Higher taxes could further affect an already slowing economy by prompting citizens to cut back on spending and causing inflation to accelerate.
The increase of inflation, which is estimated to be even about 2 percentage points, if the inflation rises so much, it means that the central bank will also increase the interest rates, what means that the economy will slow down.
Which in turn could further decrease budget revenues.
This increase of tax is starting the vicious circle, the kind of spiral that will have negative impact on the Russian economy.
The Russian economy is projected to grow just 1% this year, down from 4.3% last year. Russian President Vladimir Putin acknowledged the fact in a meeting with cabinet ministers earlier this month.
In the first 7 months of this year, GDP growth was 1.1%. Is this enough? Is this what we wanted?
And so has U.S. President Donald Trump, who met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly on Tuesday.
The biggest progress is that the Russian economy is terrible right now. As you know, it's crashing. And that, frankly, Ukraine is doing a very good job of stopping this very large army.
And the army's task could become harder still. The budget woes have prompted Russia's finance ministry to cut defense spending for next year's budget by 10 billion euros, the first such cut since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began. Such a cut could affect Russia's military performance. Ukraine has also targeted Russia's main revenue source, its energy exports.
What has substantially influenced the Russian ability to export oil and gas is the Ukrainian attacks on the infrastructure, on pipelines, on refineries, and so on.
Russian energy exports are down steeply from their 2022 highs. Falling oil prices are a major factor. After surging in the first few months of the war, prices have been on a downward trend since. Falling oil prices lower the profit margins of oil producers. At the same time, Europe, once Russia's biggest oil customer, has almost fully divested itself of Russian oil, with only a few holdouts like Hungary and Slovakia. While Russia has found new markets for its exports, particularly China and India, that hasn't been enough to make up for the lost revenue. With its revenues down, exports disrupted, and higher taxes on the horizon, Russia's economy could be in for some tough times ahead. Maciej Wilowski for TVP World.
Drones have again disrupted Danish airspace, forcing airport closures for the second time in a week. As yet, there are no direct links to Russia, but some European officials see the incidents as part of an ever-escalating hybrid war driven by the Kremlin. As Natalia Komarov reports, Copenhagen now weighing up invoking Article 4 of NATO's founding treaty.
Denmark is thinking about invoking NATO Article 4 after yet another violation of its airspace. Late Wednesday evening, unmanned aircrafts forced the shutdown of multiple Danish airports, disrupting local air traffic.
I want to make it very clear. The goal of this kind of hybrid attack is to create fear. It's to create discord and to make us afraid.
Authorities in Copenhagen are investigating the incident, as well as the previous incursions which took place on Monday. Officially, no direct link to Russia was found, and the Kremlin denies any involvement.
There's no doubt that everything points to a professional actor when it comes to such a systematic operation in so many locations, almost simultaneously.
Moreover, Danish media reported that 2 ships belonging to Russia's shadow fleet were present in the vicinity of airports targeted by drones, both on Monday and on Wednesday. Many European officials share the suspicion that Moscow could be behind these incidents.
It comes as no surprise. Even if the Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen cannot yet say where these drones came from, the suspicion is obvious. This is part of Vladimir Putin's strategy. It's a part of what we experience every day. We're not at war, but we're also no longer at complete peace.
Russia's hybrid attacks are often focused on critical infrastructure. On Wednesday, British police arrested a 40-year-old man in connection to the cyber attack that disrupted operations at several major airports across Europe on September 19. He was later released on bail, and the investigation continues.
What's happened this month in September with Poland, with Romania, with Estonia, now with Denmark, but also Norway, Sweden, and maybe even Germany is what I would call boundary testing. I do believe that it is, as I mentioned, where there's smoke, there's fire. It's the work of the Russians.
While Denmark has yet to trigger NATO Article 4, Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen spoke with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. NATO is already working on strengthening the protection of its skies. Drills are currently taking place in Portugal, where newest drone technologies are being presented, including 3D printed aerial vehicles capable of combating similar-sized airborne threats.
You've seen the incident in Poland. You have to send very expensive jet fighters against very cheap air drone, and in the maritime domain is the same.
And as the military officials say, such 3D printers could be relocated wherever needed and produce drones overnight to protect NATO airspace from future incursions. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
Just days before Moldova goes to the polls, one of the country's richest men and a former pro-Russian lawmaker has been extradited for fraud. At the same time, authorities won't allow Russian observers to monitor the election as disinformation and Moscow's circle of influence threatens the high-stakes vote. Randy Potts explains.
Moldovan business magnate Vladimir Plahotniuc, arrested in Athens on a warrant linked to a $1 billion fraud case, was extradited from Greece and landed in Moldova's capital Chisinau on Thursday. Plahotniuc, a former pro-Russian lawmaker and one of Moldova's richest men, is one of the chief suspects in Moldova's so-called theft of the century, the disappearance of $1 billion from the banking system in 2013. Plahotniuc has denied wrongdoing. This Sunday, September 28th, with Plahotniuc being held in highly publicized government custody, Moldova will vote in a parliamentary election many believe could determine the fate of its bid to join the European Union. In the referendum held last year, in which voters chose to enshrine the goal of EU accession in their constitution, the yes vote won by only a small margin of 50.4% to 49.5 percentage points.
The EU support among citizens is constant, is 60% plus. But because of the disinformation, because of the fraud that took place, where it was uncovered that about 150,000 votes were fraudulent, we got a very weak result, so to speak.
Polls this summer suggest President Maia Sandu's PAS party may lose its majority in the 101-seat legislature. An opinion poll published Wednesday by polling firm iData showed Sandu's PAS party with 24.9% support, compared with 24.7% for the pro-Russian Patriotic Bloc. Russian interference in the upcoming elections has been widely reported.
Russian propaganda has specific messages for specific categories of the population. So the main goal is to mobilize pro-Russian voters, to demotivate and demobilize pro-European voters, and to create confusion among the undecided voters.
Brussels has vocally backed Sandu and considers a pro-European Moldova an important part of snuffing out Russian influence on its eastern flank. The Russian Foreign Ministry decided to send its own election observers, but the Moldovan officials declined to accredit them. Moldova says all election-related measures are in line with both national and international obligations. For TVP World, Randy Potts.
After almost 2 weeks, Poland's border with Belarus is open again. The crossings have been shut in response to the joint Russian and Belarusian military drills known as Zapad. 2 car checkpoints and 3 freight train routes resumed operations at midnight, with hundreds of cars lining up ahead of the border reopening. The route through Belarus is a key land link between China and the European Union, worth about 25 billion euros a year and boasting a railway alternative to sending cargo by sea. But Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk says Warsaw is ready to close Poland's line of contact again, if necessary. It's regarded as a Polish tradition, foraging through the forest for edible mushrooms. But this autumn's drought has left baskets lighter than usual. Aisha Abache went to find out what's hiding under the leaves.
The autumn equinox is behind us and the hunt is on. But not for deers, not for boars, no. For Poland's favorite treasure, the mushroom. As a beginner grzybiarz, mushroom hunter that is, I asked the help of Roman Miszczuk, a deputy forest manager in Points Forest, just an hour outside Warsaw. But this year's hunt is proving harder.
This year, so far, there have been fewer mushrooms due to drought. The biggest flush and the most variety is usually at the end of August, September, and October.
Mushrooms need humidity in both the air and soil so the mycelium can grow, conditions Polish summers usually provide. But the lack of rain has affected more than just forests. The Vistula River in Warsaw fell to a record low of just 4 centimeters at one measuring point this summer, the lowest ever recorded. Still, with a keen eye, you could certainly spot a hidden gem. A big one, wow, look at this.
My wife is a mushroom picker. The most important thing for her is that she can walk and relax.
Poles are famously mycophilic. Yes, that's the word for mushroom loving. Best example, Janusz Piechuciński, a former member of parliament, minister of economy and deputy prime minister, often nicknamed the Republic's mushroom picker-in-chief.
Being a member of parliament, I created a list of people who received mushrooms from me.
Another one in my basket. This doesn't mean, however, that it is not a dangerous tradition.
If we are not certain that it's an edible mushroom, we leave it behind.
If you really cannot resist, you can bring the mushroom to the sanitary epidemiological station available in every district of Poland, where specialists will check them for free and issue a safety certificate.
There are many poisonous mushrooms that look similar to edible ones. Here's an example, the parasol mushroom, a beautiful white mushroom with a large fruit body, a frill and a tall stem. We can mistake it for the death cup mushroom.
One of the deadliest mushrooms out there.
We have many cases of mushroom poisoning every year.
The hunt today, due to drought, was tough, but we're still walking away with an honorable prize. However, the biggest lesson learned, when in doubt, just throw it out. A lighter basket is much better than a trip to the hospital. From the forests of Płonsk for TVP World, I'm Aisha Abache.
We return now to our top stories. Russian energy in Hungary and Slovakia and aerial drone incursions over NATO skies. Joining me for more is Galinda Nehus, former NATO Deputy Defence and Security Cooperation Director. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Hello.
If I may start with Russian oil, is it long overdue for the EU to finally force Hungary and Slovakia's hand and cut their supply?
I think the short answer is yes, but they have been accommodating all these years and allowing those two Russia Trojan horses really in the EU, but also in NATO to have their special role. But now clearly, I mean, for once, President Trump's pressure on his friends, because Orban and Fico are his friends, and Erdogan for that matter. So Trump's pressure is ironically helping the EU, but it's for good.
So tell me, if these two countries are Trojan horses within the EU, particularly when it comes to Russian oil, why has this taken so long? I mean, has this simply been a lack of political will in Brussels?
Well, I think they always found a compromise on the EU side and admittedly, I think they have. Let's be fair, they have reduced massively the import of oil and gas. They are now trying to phase it out until end 2026, including for LNG, which ironically again has risen. So they have been doing, in spite of those two Trojan horses, as I call them, quite some progress. But for once, and it's very rare that I agree with Donald Trump, for once he has a point. That we are filling Putin's wash chest with that, and that should simply stop.
You say Donald Trump has a point. Are we seeing a world where Donald Trump's diplomacy could be working? He's pushing Europe to do more. He's pushed NATO to ramp up defence spending, or is he doing all of that to make Ukraine and the continent's security Europe's problem, not his?
I think that's ultimately his goal, because if you look at the various strategy papers from the US, it's clear that they have two overriding priorities. One is homeland security as the top priority, and then second is the Indo-Pacific, i.e. China. They assume that China will want to be in a position to seize Taiwan, be able to seize Taiwan by 2027, and in tandem, they will reduce the U.S. presence in Europe. Also because the U.S. thinks that Russia should be dealt with by the Europeans, especially also because Russia, in the U.S. perspective, is not an immense threat, so they think the Europeans can deal with that by themselves. Yeah, and on the European side, I think whilst we have been doing quite something over past years, we have not done enough. We have too often pressed the reset button or the snooze button, for that matter, and lost precious time. And now we are in a position where we are actually running out of time, because the tandem Putin and Xi is probably gearing up their respective conflicts in the South China Sea, and Putin clearly on the European continent, as we have seen very vividly over the past days and weeks.
What do you make then of Donald Trump's sudden U-turn on Ukraine, saying Kyiv could completely take back lost land? What's his endgame here? Because some say that this is him distancing himself from Europe. Others say it's good news for Kyiv.
Well, at least it's positive rhetoric, but for Kyiv. But Trump is inherently unpredictable. So God knows what's he going to say in a week from now. In this instance, I think it was President Zelensky who spoke to him last before Trump made these statements. So what will he do on the next occasion? So I think altogether what we are seeing with the US under Trump, the US is no longer a reliable and trusted ally. I mean, Trump has repeatedly damaged the credibility of Article 5. He is coercing fellow allies, Canada and Denmark. He's cozying up with Putin, and in many ways, he wants the Ukraine issue to be solved. Not so much because of the peace which will unfold, because if it's an enforced and unjust peace, it won't be peace. But he wants to reset cooperation and business with Russia. That's, I think, ultimately his game. So I wouldn't put my hopes on Trump staying in that line anytime longer. Again, I think as Europeans, we need to take our destiny in our hand and grow up to become serious geopolitical actors.
Well, let's talk about Europe's destiny and Russia's threats. We've seen several airspace violations in recent weeks. We've seen Poland, Estonia, now Denmark twice in 1 week. On today's incident, Copenhagen says, look, there's no direct evidence of Russian involvement, but obviously they're looking into it. Is it fair to say that Moscow is ramping up a hybrid war with the West? And my second question to that is, you mentioned the EU and Brussels having put the snooze button on. in recent times and in previous years. Are we now seeing Europe struggle to deal with this hybrid war because we've been asleep at the wheel?
Yeah, I think Russia is waging, I call it a shadow war against all of us. Yeah, and we have been very hesitant in calling a spade a spade. Yeah, and investing in our own capabilities and strengths. Yeah. And as I said before, we are running out of time, because this won't go away. Putin will continue in this vein. He will continue with the aggression, with cyber attacks, with sabotage, with arson, the whole 9 yards. Yeah. So the only language Putin understands is that of serious military capabilities and also the will to use them if need be.
When you say we're running out of time, what are we running out of time from?
Well, I think I've already hinted to this scenario, which I think is unfolding with 27, the Chinese being in a position to being able to seize Taiwan. That will be the ideal moment for Putin to escalate even further, because then the US attention will be largely in the Indo-Pacific. The US will largely have withdrawn from Europe further, or reduced presence in Europe. And Europe will have had probably too little time to fill all the capability gaps in order to face Russia on its own. Yeah, so that's why I keep on insisting we are running out of time. We need to do this now. We cannot wait another decade or so in order to be able to face Russia ourselves.
And so here and now there's been this repeated talk of invoking Article 4, so not Article 5, this attack on one is an attack on all, but Article 4, NATO's consultation clause. What does that mean? I mean, does that just mean more talking among members? What does Article 4 really do if it's invoked to respond to these threats?
Well, as you know, you're right, it's consultation whenever the opinion of one of the members on its territorial integrity, political independence, or security is threatened. So I think invoking sends a political message to friends and foes alike. Yeah, and that's also why typically afterwards they issue a statement on the invocation of Article 4. Yeah. It also allows allies to share some of the assessments, and the related concerns, and it's also a possibility to float new ideas. But clearly, I mean, Article 4 is consultation. It's not Article 5, which is the collective defense clause.
So tell me then. So you talked about Russia really only responding to military capabilities. You said that Article 4 sends a political message. So Vladimir Putin gets this on his desk. Oh, OK, NATO has invoked Article 4 for a certain incident. I mean, does he just put that in the bin? Does that send any kind of message to Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, I think that's the declarations. I think he couldn't care less. Yeah, but what is more convincing is the standing up of the Eastern Sentry activity, which NATO did a few days ago. Yeah, but more could be done. I mean, NATO could upgrade the current Baltic air policing to become a true air defense activity, or a defense mission. Yeah, including automatic, also including more ground-based air and air defense on standby, and automatic non-kinetic penalties, so that there are pre-agreed decision change. So air defense, allies could look into reforming the so-called rules of engagement, which they have currently largely based on peacetime conditions. Well, we are no longer in peacetime. Yeah, we are in a period of shadow war. So they could give more pre-delegated authority to SACEUR or to the chain of command. Yeah, they could improve intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance as part of this reformed rules of engagement. They could give more support to Ukraine, including long-range strike weapons, yeah, so that Ukraine can finally more hit the bowman and not the individual arrows. Yeah? I'm also one of those advocating for allies to build the sky shield over the uncontested areas of Ukraine from European air bases. So it would not be boots on the ground in Ukraine, it would be an activity taking place from European air bases. And allies could also do more against the shadow fleet in the Baltic Sea. So these are just some ideas of what else NATO could be doing. And that is something which Putin will have an impact on Putin.
Gerlinde Nieuwhuis, former NATO Deputy Defence and Security Cooperation Director, thank you again for your time.
It's a pleasure. Good evening.
And that's all for World News tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.